Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire. I'm your host, Derbyologist, and joining me again this week is Candace here from Capping with Candace. Candace, last week we had two of the first 100-point races to the winner. First off, let's go to the Florida Derby, a highly anticipated rematch between General A-Rod and Wildcat Red, and then a couple of new guys to the bunch, Cairo Prince and Constitution.
Yeah, it ended up being a really interesting race. Constitution ended up winning it and really getting a lot of attention after that. Lots of people, like that tap at breeding and consider him a strong Derby contender. And I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being one of the favorites to get down to church for the first Saturday in May. I didn't really love his performance in particular. When they broke from the gate, Wildcat Red was sent from the rail, and he got really ranked behind Wildcat Red, which I don't think that's a surprise to either you or I, who kind of confirmed that he's a pretty headstrong guy, but I just think antics like that, you're not going to get away with that, at Churchill against, a large field of extremely talented horses. On top of that, he pretty much got the treat for a lifetime. He rode along the rail, and then, it just opened up for him at the rail at the perfect time going into the final turn, and he took advantage of it. Still kind of barely won, but he just kind of had everything go his way in that race, I think. He took advantage and got the victory, and maybe more importantly, got the points to get him to Churchill. As far as a Derby contender, I don't really know if I'd love him so much in that sense. So, yeah, he's not one that I love, but kudos to him for getting the win. Wildcat Red was game as ever to, come on as strongly as he did. He could have easily, given up and been blown out coming down the stretch, but he fought tooth and nail to lose by just a head, so, really good on him. We'll see him at Churchill as well. Cairo Prince ended up finishing fourth, coming off the layoff ever since he won at the Holy Bowl. And a lot of people have really got down on him for that. I think he ran a better race than people are giving him credit for, and surely he needed the run. When he broke from the gate, he ended up having to settle behind the Constitution, and the Constitution got ranked. Kind of forced Cairo to check up a little bit. I think Cairo clearly looked a little bit uncomfortable getting the kickback in his face, which he's never had to deal with at this point. But if you watch the replay, I was watching on YouTube, and I think it was right about the 58-second mark when he, gets out and clears out from being behind horses, and he looks like his normal self. That stride length is out, that head comes down, and he becomes the Cairo that we're used to seeing to this point. So, I think he needed the run, but he made a nice move. When he's made that move along the outside going to the final turn, I thought the race was his. He ended up flattening out a little bit, but again, coming off the layup, I don't think that's a huge surprise. So, Cairo's another one. I don't love him, but I don't hate him. But I think people are giving him a little bit too tough of a time for how he looked there. If he gets in the Derby, I think completely dismissing him as a horse without chance of finishing in the money is a bad idea.
Florida Derby was an interesting trip note sheet for my records. Constitution, as you mentioned, he was ranked early, and he was kind of shuffled up behind a couple of horses, and then he ended up getting the rail on the turn, which, it was good for him that day, but in a 20-horse field, that may be a little bit difficult to secure position. Cairo Prince, it should be noted, with the slow fractions, once he got behind, early on in the race, he was kind of forced to check behind Constitution a little bit. And then he did run a 23 3/4 to that third quarter. And like you say, he made his move. It looked like he was just going to go to the outside and do what he'd done 3 of the last 4 races. And then he just flattened out. And then, after the race, it was all about, 63 days off. And there was all these warning signs. Well, that's part of the handicapping puzzle that we have to kind of put together before the race. And afterwards, it's too easy to Sunday morning quarterback. So I do think he did get a little bit tired. I do think, it's surprising because with this point system, and then last year, they always say, sample size. And I think everybody, and I'm definitely guilty, was since last year it took no points to get into the race, or just 10 points. I thought that might be the case this year. And now everybody's like scrambling for points. And Cairo is the only horse I know of that's ranked in everybody's top 10, and yet he doesn't have enough points to get into the race. So that's very intriguing. General A-Rod, I thought, ran a good race. I thought he ran 3 wide all the way around, and he made his move on the turn, and he just kind of flattened out. But No, the trainer on this horse is Michael Maker, and I thought it looked eerily similar to Vickers and Trouble's race in the Risen Star when he just kind of made that move and then just kind of ran evenly down the lane, and you just knew that the next race would be the killer race. And I have a sneaky feeling General A-Rod, of all those horses that have shown speed, you go back to his race at Keeneland, and this is one of the few horses that actually came and passed horses with a big move. And so I will be watching every one of his workouts and reading everything that I can read on General A-Rod for the next month. Constitution's undefeated. There's nothing wrong with that. And so I think he definitely has some room to improve. Wildcat Red, you know where he's going to be. He's going to run a good race, but can he actually win a 10 furlong race being up on the engine? I think most people don't think so. But that's why they run the races. You know, I do think he's got a little bit of mud breeding, and at least his running style is going to get him in good position. And who knows? They may throw some blinkers on. He'll go out and do a 45-3.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to watch that. Anything else? What's your position right now on points? Do you think Cairo will get in, or is it going to be kind of shitty?
Well, I have him in future, so I hope he gets in. I think it's going to be a little shaky, but ultimately, I would be surprised if he doesn't get in, but I think he'll be close, like 18th or 19th or something like that. One thing I forgot to say I wanted to mention about Constitution is take note, in every race he's ran to this point, he has tugged that rail for dear life. So if he gets drawn outside at Churchill, he's done.
Very good point. He, in his debut race, he rushed to the rail, and yeah, he's 3 for 3, all 3 times kind of diving to the rail. And, if they don't get that trip, it will be interesting to see what he does in the Derby. Now, the Louisiana Derby, was kind of, how we said this was going to be a science experiment. We had 6 horses coming back from the same race, but they all flip-flop post positions, and they pretty much just changed running positions. What was your thoughts on the Louisiana Derby?
Yeah, I think we kind of both said that we expected Vickers to run well here. He had that wide trip last time out, and we both kind of mentioned that we didn't think maybe he was all out to win that race, and he came back here and stormed the front like we've been used to seeing from him, and, really kind of dominated that race. There were some interesting trips behind him, and Tenth Holiday had some crazy action. I think he hit the rail at one point, but he wasn't going to get to Vickers anyway. To me, I was really taken by Commanding Curve in that race. He was my choice. He got lambasted by Rise Up in the start of the race, was shuffled all the way to the back, and he made a really big move coming home. It was just such a shame he got third, because he probably won't get in the Derby, and he was so close to getting second, and he would have been in then, and would have been a horse who would have really fit the Derby profile. So, it's a shame, but he'll be one to keep an eye on going forward. I think he ran a really, really nice race.
Vickers was impressive going to the lead. I think that was a good race ride by Rosie. She kind of capitalized on a few of the other horses maybe grabbing early, and she took the command, at the half-mile pole, increased her advantage to the turn, and then on the turn it kind of looked like a few horses were coming after her, and I think she kind of lulled them to sleep, because Vickers then actually opened up by a couple of lengths again, and then he did kind of come home a little bit slow, and he didn't necessarily gallop out that strong, but I think he galloped out, and she didn't try to push him on the gallop out. So I think they got what they wanted there, which was $1 million purse and 100 points, and he's clearly in the starting gate. Intense Holiday with the win the last time already had 50 points. On the turn, he made that move, but I think this was a perfect example remember when Goldhawk ran closer to the pace in the Lecomte, he kind of flattened out. And if you notice, Intense Holiday was pretty much sitting in 4th place on the backstretch, and that was unusual for him to be that close. And then he just flattened out. And, this is one of the times I think people try to use handicapping angles, but they're different. When older horses routinely beat up on one another, they have a definite class pecking order, and I believe in the flattering theory, but with 3-year-olds, up until May, I don't, when Opportunity won the Rebel Stakes, it became, Intense Holiday got flattered, and then, Risen Star didn't get flattered, and I just firmly believe these races early on like this, they're a lot more random than people want to imagine, and pace and post position plays a lot bigger role than any other time of the year, and it doesn't play a role at all with once they get to the Breeders' Cup and 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds, it doesn't matter as much. But in these 3-year-old races, we're seeing at every race, you switch a post position or a pace figure, and they run a different style. So this week, we go to New York, and we've got the Wood, and we got kind of the Rocky 3 is how they're billing it, and then Social Inclusion enters the matchup.
Yes, I've been eager for the draw for this race pretty much since we got them. We got Social Inclusion through the widest coast, so you think it's probably the sense. I know his connections have talked about rating, which I don't really buy that to begin with, but we saw him last in that Speedy Allowance race with Honor Code, where he pretty much dominated their goal stream. You have to think he's going to use that speed to his advantage and, head straight for the front. Finally, Uncle Si draws to the outside of Samra, which I love. I kind of think that Social Inclusion going to the front, it's going to force Uncle Si, I think, to rate if he can. I think if he has the capability of rating, we're going to see it here. If he doesn't, then, well, we knew what that was all about. So, I'm really hoping to see Uncle Si kind of sit off the pace of mid-pack and make a big move coming home. Samurai, I think, might be forced to run a little bit more forward than he'd like, and regardless, he's going to have to run between horses, which I haven't seen him do at this point very much, so that'll be interesting to take note. Harpoon is, post 4 in the inside, which you hate, so who knows what's happening there. We might have bumper cars over there starting the race. So a lot of interesting post positions in this race as well, but I kind of like the way that it got laid out, because I think it's putting a lot of the horses in the race in positions where they kind of have to prove themselves, maybe positions where they aren't normally comfortable. And I think that's the kind of race where we're going to learn the most we can about these races. So I'm really excited about that aspect of it.
Post position, definitely a key for the Wood Memorial Stakes. Social Inclusion, by drawing that 11th post position, I think that indicates that now he doesn't have a choice but to go sending. I mean, you would have to be ultra talented to try to do a 4 or 5 wide trip on the backside in your third lifetime race. So, but he's got the natural speed. I don't think it's going to make a difference in whether he wins or loses. Mm-hmm. I just think it's now we know for a fact, I'm pretty sure Social Inclusion goes to the lead. And then when you actually add in the fact that Christo is kind of right in the middle, he's got some speed if he wants to use it. And it's not so much that he's going to use it to try to wire the field or anything like that. But if he wants to kind of just hang out in the middle of the track, that could force the issue with a Samarat to go early on Uncle Si. And I think that'll play out. And then, like you mentioned, on the inside, a couple of, closers. And then, depending on what Harpoon does on the inside, if he, gets a little bit rank early on, that could kind of cause a little bit of traffic, especially going into that first turn. So I think post positions will be a factor. Social Inclusion, I want to talk about him because I have a feeling he's going to actually be the post position favorite. And, he's one of these horses that, I guess he's kind of like Richard Sherman. You either love him or you hate him type thing. You got some people that are religious zealots of the speed figures and just say he's the fastest horse. And then, I think we consider ourselves more angles and pedigree and class and trip handicappers. And I'm more of the, I need to see a little bit more out of a horse like that. Whether he wins or loses, it's not important. I guess, what are you going to be watching for out of him? And then, what are the odds of a horse like this? Like, would you bet him if he was 10-1, or do you just kind of throw horses out like this?
If he was double digits, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't I have a little bit on him? For me, I kind of agree with you. It doesn't matter if he wins or loses because, the pace that he sets will dictate if he's really pressured and they go really fast early and, he faced 4th or 5th, well, then that maybe wasn't such a bad race to begin with. A horse like him, I think I'm really looking for, coming home when he's going to have, other horses coming at him if they're close. I want to see a little bit of grit. I want to see, how does he handle himself under pressure? And when you get to the Derby, I mean, unless you're a superstar, you're not going to blow him away by 10. So you're going to have some pressure at some point. I want to see how he handles that and if he's able to put that away.
A couple of horses I want to talk about. Me and you have been kind of waiting for the reappearance of Noble Moon. And this is a horse who ran really fast last year in his first lifetime race and then ran a good race to Cairo Prince in the Nashua. Then he won the Jerome, and that was, in the middle of winter, early part of January, and it was really cold that day, and the track was just major slow. And I think a lot of people off that race think that this is just a slow horse. And I'm not so sure about that. I mean, his 2 speed figures as a juvenile indicate he's got a little bit of speed. And the long, slow gallops, he missed a little bit of time with training, but he's been in training now for almost 2 months, and they decided to enter him. So I like Noble Moon a little bit. I think his speed figures don't really reflect, or that Jerome speed figure doesn't. And, the pedigree is there to be strong, especially with that King Mambo. And then another horse is Wicked Strong. This is a horse that was bet down big time in the Holy Bull, and then kind of flopped and then lost in the Constitution race. But now that race looks a little bit better. And this is another horse who I always, in the springtime, one of my popular betting angles is when a lot of these Gulfstream horses go up to New York and Keeneland, and they hit that 50-degree weather, and there's no humidity, and a lot of horses jump up. And this horse, his last 2 workouts, 7 furlongs in 127, 6 furlongs in 113, and James Jerkins kind of calling the shots. And then you look at it, and lo and behold, his 3 best races were in New York, and I always take a second look at a horse like this.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on both of them. Noble Moon really caught my attention in the National, and he had a troubled start, and he really closed like a freight train to finishing third to Cairo Prince there. And, that was a pretty speedy race, and I know he got like a 90-plus speed figure for a season, which was really nice. He came back in the Jerome, and like I said, the track was slow, and people have kind of written him off as a slow horse, and they've written off that feeling since the horse has beaten him done much since then. But, that race, I think that one was more about him. Maybe, I don't know if people remember, but he was actually supposed to run the Remsen, and he ended up breaking out in heights and now running there. So instead of running in like December, he ended up running, much later in the Jerome. So, there was a lot of things there that were going on that weren't according to plan. He was just a horse who I think even there just really needed the run. He wasn't going to blow anyone away there. He just needed to get a run in. And, unfortunately he missed some time. He was injured, but he's had a couple of really long workouts, really wild workouts with the Siege and with Sweet Reason lately. And, the notes of him have always been that he has these monstrous gallop outs of these mile workouts. And like you said, the Noble Moon is King Mambo. I mean, he's a horse in here that we're not worried about him getting the 9 furlongs, that's for sure. We'll see how fast he is and how fast the pace is up front, because he thinks that he'll be slower to pace. But, he should be one who should get the distance, at least from pedigree perspective. I also agree about Wicked Strong. We kind of talked about how it was really weird when he kind of had that no-show, down at Gulfstream, and he looked much better last time out in the Constitution Optional Flamer. He finished 4th there, and that was a pretty nice race. The Constitution winning, Cornelius got second and September 3rd. He looked really good coming down the stretch that race. He actually caught my eye coming down the stretch before Mexicoma kind of blew by him at the end. So, I thought that he kind of came back a little from whatever happened in the Holy Bowl that, I don't think we'll ever find out. So, I could definitely see him coming up here and having a big effort. Whether it's not enough to win, I'm not too sure, but he's definitely one who could finish 2nd or 3rd, I think, very easily. Another one who I want to mention here is Chiravelli. He's ran twice, and he has a quick turnaround here. He just ran on February 21st, so, I'm not sure about, if he's going to be ready to win here or whatnot, but he had 2 pretty fast races, and I tried to watch the replay of his last race, and there was no shock. I didn't see much. But his race was
Sigmund Goza, he said that it was visually impressive, and I said, how could you even see it? It was foggy, I said.
It was all fog. His first race was very nice, so where he broke his maiden in the first attempt, I quite liked that. The little bit I saw of him passing the wire in the fog looked okay, I guess, last time out, but he has some pretty nice speed figures, and yeah, it's a quick turnaround, but, even coming out of here, he might just be one to keep an eye on going forward.
Bankroll plays for this week. We are going to try to take a stab here. We're both in the negative territory now. Last week I didn't quite get that exactly with Cairo Prince, but I'm going to kind of try to dutch my way out of this one with Uncle Si and Wicked Strong. And my rationale for this is I kind of consider Uncle Si kind of even with Samrat. And I think he's going to be about twice the odds, at least according to the morning line and just the way people perceive those horses in the futures. And then also I think Wicked Strong could creep up here to maybe 15-1. And so I'm going to try to go 10 to win on each of those two horses and just hope maybe social inclusion kind of totes the tilt board into overlay territory on those two. What's your strategy here?
I have to get something. I can't catch a break. I had Wildcat Red last week, and I thought I was home free, and then didn't get it there. Ended up barely losing. So we're gonna try to make up for it here. I have Uncle Sai on top. If you follow me on Twitter, you know, I agree with you. I think him and Samrod is being pretty even, and I think Uncle Sai is really his post position has forced him to kind of do the dirty work in two races that they faced each other. He's been the one who's either been on the lead, you know, I think the first race that they faced each other, Samrod had a clear path to advantage, and, you know, the second time around they got them, Uncle Sai was really the one up there pressing was in trouble. So, you know, if he is capable of rating and does that here, I think he has a big chance. And then underneath, you know, try to just go both ways. Have Samrod and social inclusion maybe be a little safe, and then throw Wicked Strong Noble Moon and that Spear Valley for a few prices.
Sounds like a good strategy. One other note about Noble Moon I noticed, and I kind of circled on my past performances, was I remember a quote from Gary Contessa saying that he didn't work out Uncle Sai this last couple of workouts at the Belmont training track because he said it was kind of deep. Mm-hmm. And that's where all of Noble Moon's workouts have been. So people that are trying to evaluate workouts, you know, some of those times are going to be a little bit slower aqueduct. So just something to note. And I think at least, you know, Noble Moon may not be as slow as some people are perceiving that horse. Now, whether he's good enough or not, I'm not sure. But I just think people think he's like a Scotland, and he's 10 lengths better than Scotland. I mean, it's just a whole different class of horse. Yeah. Now we go out west, Santa Anita Derby. What's interesting is a month ago, everybody said all the good horses were on the East Coast. And then you look at the latest rankings, and the top 3 ranked horses, it's again, remember we talked about this 2 weeks ago, it seems like the longer you don't run, the more people like you. It's like that old boyfriend from high school. He's looking better every day, doesn't he?
Oh, how'd you know? That's exactly what I was thinking. No, that's all I've been hearing for maybe the last month is all the good horses are in California. So, it's interesting to see how they look here. We get California Chrome back. So, you know, off of a couple big efforts in a row, I don't totally know what to expect of him. I'd be pretty surprised if he was kind of all out in this race. But, you know, he needs to run. So I expect him to kind of do what he has to do to get the run in and be fresh for the Derby. Kind of the same thinking from Opportunity who's here. We saw him, of course, winning over Tapper and the gang last time out. So both of them, while they're nice horses, don't be put off. I don't think they won't win. Because I don't know if they're necessarily coming here to win. Maybe just to get that run in before they go to Derby. I think the logical play here is Candy Boy. He won the Robert B. Lewis pretty impressively, and he needs the points, unlike the others. We both kind of commented. I know you brought up to me a workout of his that was online that we saw where he was rating, and it's really nice there. So he just seems to be fresh, seems to be ready. It'll depend on how he fires, first time off the layoff, but. So of the real contenders here who have shown us something, he seems to be, kind of the logical play just because he really, really needs this race.
I think the pace in the Santa Anita Derby could be similar to the Florida Derby last week, where Wildcat Red kind of took advantage, went 24, 48, 112, and then was able to finish. And I think California Chrome's going to be kind of in that same situation, where he is probably going to try to be forced to the lead just because nobody else really wants it. And that's one of the most powerful angles in racing, the class horse on a slow pace. But we both kind of agree Candy Boy won't be too far behind him. And, with Opportunity, I think we saw in that last race, the mud moved him up a little bit. But he really, was kind of on my radar. And his second maiden race, he really improved. And then he closed in the Risen Star. And that's always a big challenge facing winners for the first time. So I do think Opportunity is now kind of in the top 10 or 15 horses. And I expect another good effort out of him just because he does seem to fire a good race every time. I mean, he's never really not put in a solid effort, and the distance shouldn't be a problem. That pedigree is pretty solid with Any Given Saturday and Distorted Humor. And then, on the mare's side, that mare's already kicked out a multiple graded stakes winner, executive privilege. The last time I talked about School of Hard Rocks, and problem there is that off the layoff, he came out of that gate actually second place behind California Chrome. And I know that was not the plan. And to run a 45.3, I mean, I'm a runner and I'm a distance runner. And if you told me to, like, in a marathon, to run my first mile in 6 minutes, and then I'd just be staggering home, and then he made a second move along the backstretch. So I think School of Hard Rocks is going to improve by about 6 or 7 lengths here. Now, whether that's good enough to compete with these guys, but I don't think California Chrome is 15 lengths better than School of Hard Rocks. I just don't think that. Any other horses you want to talk about? I know everybody's favorite maiden is in here, our pretty boy Floyd.
Yeah, I will say about School of Hard Rocks, I agree with you. I expect a big improvement. He did seem a little bit keen there early on. So, he's one I'm looking to. Our pretty boy Floyd, like you said, I mean, he draws the rail, which is probably atrocious for him. He's probably be wants to be in last place first. But, we make fun of him a little, but, this poor guy finished second 4 out of his 5 starts and against pretty good horses. I mean, is he good enough to win here? Probably not, but you'd be admitted to not have him in your executive choice. He's like a lock. He's never finished worse than third. So, he's an interesting one. And, I really hope at some point they get him away from the runway that is Santa Anita, because I think he could be a pretty nice horse. But, both him and School of Hard Rocks, if, who knows if they get in the top 2 and get the points. Again, we're talking about 2 closers, in a potentially very speedy Derby, which, I think automatically makes you contender.
I officially selected Candy Boy as my selection here, mainly because, I really do think Gary Stevens fits this horse well. He's ridden him in the cash call, and he made that huge move. He went from 8th place and took the lead on the backside, and then Shared Belief ended up running by him. But one of the things I noticed that day is a lot of times a horse like that, after making a huge move, would fade all the way back to like 5th or 6th, and that entire stretch run, I mean, he just kept on running right along. And I was impressed. Even that day, I just said, wow, this guy really dug in here. It seemed like he kind of really went up to that next level. And then, in that last race, he sat in the pocket, he was calm, and then he kind of went to the outside, and he kind of just wore down Shittu. And at the time, we said, well, maybe that's not a big win. But then, Shittu was game down at Sunland. So I think at least it was kind of a measuring stick. I don't want to say that it was this, a great victory. The pedigree is there. Everybody loves the Candy Ride. And then, the mare on that horse was a nice mare. She won a couple of races by 7 and 11 lengths. She ran in the Black Eyed Susans, didn't do well, but, basically a grade 1, grade 2 quality type mare. So the breeding is there, and Gary Stevens, John Sadler, and then the last 3 workouts have all been on TVG. And I like what I like about the workouts is, one of the times they had him in the last workout outside of horses, and then 2 workouts ago they had him inside a horse and behind a horse. So they're kind of teaching him to race a little bit in the mornings. And, maybe to some people this is obvious, but a lot of times, the same horses that we kind of give grief to, we say like, oh, we got the same trip 4 times in a row. Well, when you watch workouts, they do the same thing they're always on the outside, and they always run 5 furlongs, and they always work out to do with the same horse. And so I just like the fact that they're kind of trying some different things with Candy Boy, and I do expect a good race out of him. What about Big Tire and some of the other newcomers in this race? I mean, does anybody else have a chance to crash the party? Is this really Cal Chrome, Candy Boy, and Opportunity the most likely to win?
I think it would be amiss to go outside of, those, maybe the big 3 have the best chance of winning, maybe School of Hard Rocks, something like that. But I think anything past that, there's kind of a really big drop off to Big Tire and company. My official pick in here also Candy Boy. I think he really needs to race with obviously the opponent. I just think he's really more well meant in this spot. Agree with everything you just said, so I won't repeat it all. But I also, on my blog, I recommended a Candy Boy, Our Pretty Boy Floyd, School of Hard Rock, etc.
Nice. I like that one. Now, one of the things you always talk about watching the replays, and I remember a couple people tweeted you and said, well, what do you watch for the replays? So Do you watch the start of the race, the end of the race? What exactly? I mean, a lot of times people say they're watching replays, but what does that entail for Candace?
A lot more than it should. Usually for me, I pull up the replay and I just watch it once, not focusing on anything, just watching the race. So, what different things will catch my attention, as far as pace and such. I'll take notes of whatever catches my attention, just watching the race as a whole and how it unfolds. And then typically I'll watch the race once for every runner and isolate that runner. So in bigger fields it can be kind of time consuming, but sometimes you miss those trips in there in the middle of the pack or the back of the pack because you're keeping you focusing on the horses who are leading the first time around. So I like to kind of watch time and isolate each horse in the race.
Couple of Oaks preps this week. Friday's the Ashland, and then Saturday we've got 3 nice stakes races. We got the Gazelle in New York, the Fantasy Stakes at Oaklawn, and then the Santa Anita Oaks, which is being run on the same day as the Santa Anita Derby this year, which I kind of like because then it makes it more like a true Oaks prep, and it gives people a chance that are actually on track to see both the boys and the girls. First off, out east, a lot of the attention is going to go to Got Lucky. A lot of people will probably be noticing in its last race, it ran second to Untappable, who was pretty outstanding again last week at the fairgrounds. But a horse that I kind of like is Birdmaker. She ran at the Gulfstream Surface, and this horse had a big win last year in Kentucky, and then it followed up with a nice second-place effort in the Goldenrod Stakes. And I think this is one of those horses that's going to improve getting off the Gulfstream Surface and getting kind of that cooler 50-degree weather. And then another horse you mentioned, Sweet Reason, she's been working out against Noble Moon, and I know she's got a string of long-distance works. Anybody in the Gazelle you're kind of looking at?
Well, you just mentioned her. I was going to kind of look at Sweet Reason. She hasn't really done much wrong to this point. Fourth in the British Regional Fillies, won last time out in a short field opposite Claimer. But like you said, she, in that most recent mile workout with Noble Moon, she ran in that with him, and actually, I think a few times I saw she won that work, and then she did it. So I'll be interested in seeing her now coming back second time off the rail.
Then in the Santa Anita Oaks, it's a small field. They actually got a couple extra horses late. Kind of a speed, another race that doesn't have a lot of speed in the race. Island Fashion Plate took the lead last time, but the final quarter was 26 seconds. And then with Smiling Tiger not opting to go in this race, you've got Arethusa, who's a nice closer by Street Cry, and then a couple of other horses. Anybody in here that you're kind of watching or maybe think might have a hidden trip note?
Yeah, Arethusa is kind of one I've been watching. I named her my blog as a horse to watch after she won in Hollywood in the Sharp Cat. She's a nice closer, and she's one who seems to be doing better and better. I actually kind of quite liked the race. Where she was third behind Streaming and Fashion Plate last time out. So, we'll see how she does. Santa Anita's always a little hit or miss as far as being able to close on that track. But, she's one I'll be looking at, a daughter of APMD.
And then we should note that Rhea Antonia, she gets a new trainer for this race after kind of running a dull fourth at the fairgrounds. Bet pretty heavily in that race. And again, that was Untappable, so I mean, it's not like she didn't run against a good horse, but I think most people kind of watched that race and were just surprised at how flat she was. And definitely the owner was, because he got her out of there and moved her out west. And of course, with the new trainer, working out 6 furlong workouts and the fast 4 furlong workout the other day, I have a feeling she's been trained a lot harder, and she goes back to kind of where she won her big upset at 30-1. I officially picked Rhea Antonia. Do you think she's the type of horse that can maybe regain some of that form and probably give Untappable a better matchup in Kentucky than she did at the fairgrounds?
I think she can do better than she did there. I mean, there's other horses who I prefer going versus Untappable in Kentucky than her. But, I mean, if she, runs back to how she did in the Breeders' Cup, then, anything's possible. And there are some excuses there for how she looks behind Untappable. Maybe not for how bad she looks, but, maybe expecting her to win, right then was a little bit much. And, we'll see how she does. It's going to be interesting now with her out with Baffert, so we'll see if expecting her right away.
All right, we could not let this edition of Down to the Wire finish recording without you getting your chance to talk about Malice from last week so that you can get this out of your system wearing your Penguins jersey here. Now tell us all about Malice last week.
He looked, well, I mean, I don't want to be a little downer because he did look great. But as big of a fan as I am of his, I wasn't like, I mean, I feel like everyone on Twitter was like, there you go, horse of the year. And I'm not going to be sucked into that at all. I loved how he looked. But a lot of the things, I mean, I've seen the horse who kind of, when he wins, he's always going to get big figures. Because he kind of, people made a big deal, oh, he ran on the outside. Well, he always runs on the outside. That's nothing new. That's how he always runs. If anything, I was a bit impressed. Early on he had to settle a little further back than is typical of him. So for him to still win off that was nice to see. No fault. He ran a really, really nice race. Maybe a little bit disappointing performance in the Invasion. The only thing I'll note about Malice, as much as I don't want to say anything bad, these whole gate issues, he's really flustered in the gate, and that's kind of becoming more of a trend than just an anomaly now. And remember back at Travers, he of course, stumbled out of the gate there. In the Breeders' Classic, he broke a step slow there. So, that's just something when you're kind of careful to keep an eye on that. He is kind of showing to have some of these issues at the gate.
All right, so you're half blast full type of person in Malice this week.
Yeah.
That's good. And your boy Mikey Smith didn't screw it up for you.
He didn't screw it up. Yes, he can say now.
All right, that's good. So now we look forward this week, the Santa Anita Derby, the Wood, and then next week we come back with the Bluegrass, and I understand there may be a certain kitten running in that race, and then we also have the Oaklawn Park race. So I know we're going to have a lot to talk about next week on Down to the Wire. So looking forward to that, and that's going to do it for another edition of Down to the Wire.